Okay, what we're going to look at today is multiplying integers. Now, here are the rules for multiplying integers. If you have a negative times a negative, okay, that comes out to a positive answer. Negative times a positive or a positive times a negative equals a negative answer. You do the multiplication the same way. Okay, multiply just normally. Obviously, if they're both positive numbers, the answer is positive. Now, another rule that I kind of like, okay, is if you have an odd number of negatives, you're going to have a negative answer. Okay, so you can count up the number of negative numbers you have in the problem. So if you're multiplying a list of numbers together, a list of integers, maybe there's even 10 of them to multiply together, and 5 of them are negative numbers. You can just count them up and say, okay, there's 5 negative numbers, my answer is going to be negative, and then just ignore the signs and go ahead and multiply normally, and just make sure you have a negative in front of your answer, and you'll have it correctly if you multiply right. Okay, you know, on the same line of that, then if you have an even number of negative numbers, your answer is going to be positive. So getting back to that example that I mentioned, you know, the 10 numbers that the 10 integers you're multiplying together, if 6 of them are negative, it's going to be a positive answer. Just go ahead and multiply, make sure your answer is positive. Okay, and I'll kind of talk about that as we go. Okay, here are 4 problems that I'm going to do up here, all right? And if we take a look at this first one right here, we have 3 times negative 9. Now the parentheses just help to keep the problem neat. That's multiplied. There's no sign, no operation sign between the 3 and the negative 9. Okay, so it's multiplied. And since we have a positive times a negative, okay, our answer is going to be negative. Once again, if you count the negative numbers, there's just one negative number, one, you know, thinking one as odd. That's going to be negative 27 for the answer for that one. Okay, if we go to this one here, obviously 2 positives. Okay, 25 times 3, 75. Okay, no negative number involved. Here we have one negative integer and a positive, so 8 times negative 9. Now this one's just set up a little bit differently. Okay, they put a dot to show multiplication instead of one of the numbers in parentheses with nothing. Okay, so once again we multiply. We have one negative number. Okay, so it's going to be a negative answer. Answer here, negative 72. Okay, now over here, written just a little bit differently. All right, we have negative 4 times negative 8. 2 negatives. Okay, so 2 is an even number in this case, so think of it that way. It's going to be a positive answer. Or if you want to remember the other rule was a negative times a negative is going to give you a positive answer. Okay, so this ends up being positive 32. You know, and what I tell students is you know, these rules really need to be memorized. They're not that complicated, and either they go, you know, with the even and odd, if that works for them, fine. Or if they rather just remember that you know, a negative times a negative is a positive, and a positive times a negative is going to give you a negative answer. I think the other, you know, there's really no other rules to remember. They already know that if they have 2 positives, that's a positive. So there's not a lot to memorize, but I think it is important that they do memorize it. Okay, here's another set now. Here we have 3 integers involved. Always a little bit more challenging, but nevertheless very doable. Okay, so here we have 2 times negative 11 times 5. No operation signs in between the numbers, that means multiply. Usually 1 or 2 of the numbers will be in parentheses to just help keep it neat and to know that you know, those numbers don't run together. Okay, now the order does not matter. Okay, that's the commutative property of multiplication. You can multiply in any order that you want here. So whatever makes the problem easier for the student is the way you want to multiply. So what I'm going to do here is I would probably go 2 times 5 is 10. Okay, and then 10 times 11 is fairly easy for me to do in my head. Okay, so that's going to equal 110. Now I got to get the right sign now. Okay, there's one negative number. Okay, so my answer is going to be negative, negative 110. Now, if you did it in order, 2 times negative 11 is negative 22. Okay, then negative 22 times positive 5 is going to be a negative 110. So it doesn't, even though there's 3 integers involved, the order or the rule that they use does not matter as long as they do things correctly with it. All right, here now we have 3 negative integers all being multiplied together. Okay, now sometimes what I like to tell students too is you can determine before you even get started, is it positive or negative? So that is out of the way. In this case here, I know my answer is going to be negative. Okay, because I have 3 negative numbers, I know it's going to be a negative answer. Or if you follow order here, negative times a negative would be a positive. Then you're going to have for your last step a positive times a negative, which is a negative answer. So either rule is going to work just fine. I already determined it's going to be negative, so now I can worry about multiplying this thing correctly instead of whether it's going to be a positive or negative integer. So in this case here, order on this one, I don't know that there's a way that's easier. I would probably go 7 times 6 is 42, and then 42 times 8. Okay, that's 336. Students are probably going to have to work that out off to the side. But this one ends up being negative 336 for the answer. And I'm more worried right now that they understand that it's a negative answer and why it's negative than I am, the multiplying. They'll get that. Okay, here again, one written a little bit differently. Only we got 2 numbers in parentheses, no operation signs. Once again, it's all multiplied. Here we have 2 negative integers. Okay, so I know my answer is going to be positive. And if you follow, so I can go ahead and put that down, it's going to be a positive, or I don't need to put a sign in if I know it's going to be positive. A negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, then a positive times a positive obviously is positive. So, or if they went this order, a negative times a positive is negative here. Negative 20 times 5 is going to be negative 100. And then negative 100 times another negative number, a negative times a negative is a positive. So a lot of confusion, dealing with this somewhat, and that's why students need to go with, one approach, stick with it, and the more problems they do, the better they'll get at it. So this one here, the order really doesn't matter how they set it up. It comes out to positive 800. How they multiply it as far as the order they want to multiply it does not matter. The key here is it's positive because there's 2 negatives. And that's it. Hopefully that'll be helpful. If you're stuck on these type of problems, hopefully this little review is helpful.